Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are around the world. David Lister here, sitting in Marco's seat this week. I'm the fill-in guy, and I'm very privileged to be here today and be here with Jacob and our behind-the-scenes people such as Davey from Australia and James. And so we thank you. And so first I want to let Jacob have some announcements that he would like to let everyone know. Jacob?
A few things very briefly. This weekend, I shall be speaking in Rotterdam, Holland, organized by Moriel European Branch. Details are on the Moriel website, moriel.org, or you can just Google Moriel itinerary, and it will give you the details as to the location. It's a small country, of course, so people from Utrecht, Amsterdam, The Hague, Rotterdam itself, and other environs, Zoetermeer, are all expected to attend. We hope we see you there in Rotterdam if you're in Holland. Occasionally, we may even get people from Belgium or Germany, but we'll be in Rotterdam this weekend. The main meeting will be Sunday. Details are on the website. Also, the following weekend, I'm in the south coast of England, in Bournemouth at the Moordown Center. I'm at the Moordown Center at a Moriel meeting organized by Moriel. That will be on Saturday evening, the 22nd. And the following Sunday, there's a Moriel affiliated church at Crossroads, and that will be held in the same facility, the same building in Bournemouth. Details are also on the Moriel website, moriel.org, or just Google Moriel itinerary. We also have upcoming meetings in Northern Ireland. Those are being arranged as we speak, and the Republic of Ireland as well. Those will be announced shortly. But we're in Amsterdam and we're in the south coast of England within the next few weeks. If you can join us, we'd love to see you. Meanwhile, some other developments. As you all know, censorship and anti-Christian bias, anti-conservative, anti-libertarian bias is increasing in social media with this left-wing perspective. We know these things are all tied in with the World Economic Forum. Not that we're given to conspiracy theories or theorists, but we know pretty much what's happening globally. There is a trend. It involves government, it involves mainstream media, it involves Silicon Valley, and a lot of other people who are often inimical to Judeo-Christian values, inimical to a lot of things on a variety of issues, from indoctrinating children on sexual orientation at the ages of 4 and 5 to non-therapeutic abortion right up until the day before birth, 40 weeks gestation, the sins of Moloch worship, actually, in effect. And speaking out about these things is becoming increasingly punitive. So we have done everything we can progressively to not fully immunize ourselves, but place ourselves in a situation where we will still be operational. You'll see that we're on Rumble, we're on various other platforms, Vimeo, BuzzFeed, and so forth, Rumble being one of the main ones. But our primary alternative channel is, of course, RTN, where Moriel is a partner ministry, RTN Christian TV and radio in Scotland. If anything were to happen, just go to RTN, go to Rumble, you'll find us. We'll still be there. But we're bringing about some major changes. We're going to be kissing YouTube goodbye virtually as soon as we can. We're developing another independent server for Moriel, and we will have Moriel.tv, which will be beyond the clutches of Silicon Valley, beyond the clutches of those who control social media. They won't be able to harass us anymore. We will simply use YouTube as a forwarding platform, as a place to direct traffic to us, because we don't like them, we don't trust them, we don't respect them, and they hate us. And if you hold to the word of God, they hate you too, it would appear. So it would appear, in the opinion of many people. Be that as it may, they may even try to close us down for what I just said. So we've had it with them. We are moving to our own independent server. Please be advised of this. More announcements will be coming soon, but it will not be complicated. If you watch Moriel on YouTube, you will have an easy mechanism to watch us on our own website, moriel.org. That'll be moriel.tv, and it will be available on our own website and on other platforms. Then it will be taking place, hopefully, before the end of the year. So please keep these things in mind and keep these things in prayer. Something has to be done. Brother David Wood was basically forced to make a similar decision, as have other believers. And we're just going down the path of common sense as the Lord would lead. Thank you so much. David.
Well, thank you, Jacob. Well, let's hope that YouTube will tolerate us forwarding, but they're kicking people off for trying to do that. So
Yes.
look, you can find, we on our website, moriel.org, we have a thing, a banner that says Find Moriel. You can go there and you can find us. And so maybe bookmark that, everyone, so that you know how to get us. We have all sorts of links of where you'll be able to see our stuff. Look, I've told people a long time, you should be downloading our stuff, putting it on thumb drives so that you can have teaching when they come for us, and or have Bible. But the best place to hide all this is in your heart. Memorize the word of God so that you might not sin against someone that says. So, Jacob, let's get into President Biden. Well, I don't know what math school he went to, Jacob. I took up to calculus. I can add and subtract and everything, but he threw out some interesting numbers. He said basically overall inflation was 2% over the last 3 months. That's down from 11% the prior 3 months. So that's progress. But I know you have some thoughts on this, but John Rich has a new song and he says, well, if that's progress, you know where you can stick it. So anyway, you take care of it from there.
Yesterday, it was announced by Mr. Biden himself from his own lips that if the Republicans were in power, inflation is going to get worse. Well, I'm not a Republican, but when the Republicans, or at least when Donald Trump was in power, inflation was about 2%. Now it is the highest it's been in 40 years. He admits to an 8.3%, but when you add to it the fact that the government does not include such commodities as the increased price of gasoline, we know that it's certainly well over 10%. It's over, it must be over 10% when you add gasoline. So the very fact that the government uses fudge statistics in itself that are incomplete for the consumer price index not being accurate according to the way the government calculates the rate of inflation and the CPI are two different things. That in itself tells you how shifty these people are. But Mr. Biden went on to say that none of the tax increases that he has proposed and that the Democratic Congress has passed since he's been president have raised taxes even 1 penny, not 1 penny, on people earning under $400,000 a year. How the mainstream media could allow him to get away with a lie like that proves that while he may be delusional and senile and not really in command of what he's of his own tongue, that all may be, they are complicit in this deception. They must be. Let's look at the absolute facts. He has cut the Donald Trump $13,000 exemption in half by 50%, from $13,000 to $6,500.
Yeah.
How can you say there's no tax increase? It's an out and out lie. Worse than that, the average income in the United States of the average family is And again, you've got those who are much lower and those who are higher, but the statistical median average is $1,120 a week. And that's dragged higher by upper middle class people and wealthy people. For many families, it's obviously lower. But 1,120 a week. Say that you were right there and that was your income, $1,120 a week. If the inflation rate was 10% and the tax rate that people in that income category pay is 28.4%, the purchasing power has decreased by at least 10%, but you are still being taxed as if you were earning $1,120 a week, even though you were earning 10% less than that. Prorated on the basis of 28.4% per annum. The average American family income, the average American taxpayer is paying nearly $1,700, specifically $1,694 more a year. You're paying $1,700 a year more. What inflation is taxation without representation, as Milton Friedman explained it. They're spending money and your money becomes worth less. Instead of passing a tax increase, they simply print money and devalue the money you have, but they still tax you at the rate that it used to be valued at. It is just a lie. It is a ripoff. On top of the $6,500 he took out of your pocket, he's now taking another $1,700 a year out of your pocket if you're the average wage earner, on average. He just lies. The man has no scruples about lying. But the mainstream media have no scruples about pandering to the lie, about not challenging him on the lie. They have no scruples whatsoever. I pray for divine judgment on the mainstream media. They are not the watchdogs of the public interest.
All right. Well, Jacob, one of the things is that the consumer product price index for September showed a 13% annual jump in the cost of groceries, 19.8% cost in energy prices. And so things are not looking better. In fact, one of the chief economics at RSM, which is an American consulting firm, estimated last month on what it's going to cost to get inflation down, said it's going to take 5.3 million lost jobs and an unemployment rate of 6.7%. You and I went through the inflation and the recession and up and down cycles of the 70s and our 20s, and it was terrible. And that's the type of cuts that it had to do before it got brought down to 2% inflation. Was a lot of pain for the people. And the Fed Chairman Powell knows this, because he even had said, I believe it was him that said, inflation is easy to have, but it's hard to get rid of, and it's going to be costly, and people have to prepare for this.
All Mr. Powell was doing was parakeeting Milton Friedman.
Yep.
Milton Friedman compared inflationary economy coming from printing money to an alcoholic going on a binge, going on a drunk. And he thinks or she thinks they can drink their problems away, or their problems become more manageable or copable if they're inebriated. But the more they drink, the more their problems compound. The initial benefits of going on a drunk happen in the short term, except they're not really benefits. You're only setting yourself up for something bad. But then when you try to kick alcohol and you go through delirium tremens, DTs, or something of this nature, then the bad effects come before the good effects.
Right.
So the good effects come before the bad, except they're not really good, but the bad come before the good, and they are really bad. This is the situation that you're dealing with.
Yep.
Mr. Powell is no economic genius. You don't have to be. We have economic charlatans like Janice Yeltsin, who just a babbler, a ridiculous woman who doesn't even seem to know what she's talking about. Yet she's the Treasury Secretary of the USA, and she was in the Federal Reserve System. These crazy people. Look, it's just supply and demand applied to the money supply, essentially. In the month of September in the United States, 175,000 jobs were lost. Fasten your seatbelt. That's the appetizer before the main course. Worse is coming. Let me tell you who is going to be hit the worst. Minorities. They're going to be hit the worst. Barack Obama, the food stamp president, that's his only real legacy. He was the food stamp president, saw radical declines in Afro-American family incomes of $900 after 8 years in the White House, after 2 terms. I've said this before, it went down. Under Donald Trump, Afro-American family income increased by $1,000 in 11 months, and you had record low Afro-American unemployment and record low unemployment among Black American youth. Minorities, particularly Blacks who vote Democrat, are going to be hit first and worst. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. They will remain the low man on the totem pole. They will remain the food stamp recipients. They will remain people with no upward mobility. They will remain that way. The policies of the Democratic Party will assure it. And make sure that the next generation of Blacks will be the same because of the failed school system that they demand be kept in place in league with the teachers' unions. There's no way out for Black Americans unless they were to listen to people like Candace Owen or Larry Elder, which again are castigated by the mainstream media. They will rather listen to Al Sharpton, or they will rather listen to Cory Booker or Stacey Abrams. These people will guarantee Black Americans will remain in the basement, will remain in the gutter economically. Absolutely, the party of Jim Crow and the party of slavery will make sure that the Black man has always been where they've always kept the Black man, in the gutter. The Blacks will get it worst, but so will other minorities. Fortunately, some Blacks are waking up and listening. What you make of Kanye West is something else, but he sees through the corruption. He used to be a supporter of Barack Obama. He used to be. Well, you see, Tulsi Gabbard, the woman, she used to be a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I agree that people who vote Democratic seem to be very stupid people, self-destructively stupid. But they're all not stupid. They're not that stupid. Some of them are going to wake up and see, I don't want to be in the gutter anymore. And this party will drag the country into the gutter, especially the minorities. Well, that's what's happening. Hispanics are waking up. Some Blacks are waking up. A number of women are waking up. People who used to vote Democrat. They may have been stupid in the past, but they're not going to be stupid anymore. They're tired of being stupid. And the establishment is angry about it. The Democratic Party and the mainstream media are angry about it because they're guilty of an unforgivable crime. Telling the truth. Telling the truth. Candace Owens is guilty of telling the truth. Tulsi Gabbard is guilty of telling the truth. Concerning abortion in the Black community, Kanye West is guilty of telling the truth. They're guilty of telling the truth.
Yep.
That is what happens. That is exactly what's going on. This recession will be massive. It may have technically already begun. It has certainly already begun in Europe. And minorities will be hit worst. The people who were stupid enough to vote for Biden and stupid enough to vote Democrat will reap the just fruits of their own stupidity. Sorry to be blunt. And again, I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. I'm pro-life. I'm conservative. I'm libertarian, but I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an independent.
Yeah. All right.
That's the reality.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, I know you're not talking about people being congenitally stupid, but by their repeated actions over and over of doing the wrong thing, they make themselves stupid.
The book of
And
Jeremiah, sorry, David, the book of Jeremiah uses the word abil, abil. My people are stupid, says Jeremiah. It doesn't mean that they were born with low intelligence. It means they pervert their logic. They pervert their logic. They believe what they want to believe instead of what the facts dictate. They think with their emotions and their biases. They resort to a stupidity of choice, an idiocy of choice that turns to their own destruction. Read the book of Jeremiah. Now, we're talking about it here economically. Even more so, it's the moral issues of indoctrinating children that it's normal to be to ignore the fact that you are either double X or XY chromosomally, indoctrinating children to ignore the genetic science. If you think that's acceptable, you're a stupid person because you choose to be stupid.
Yeah.
Yet that's what predominates. And those who speak against it are castigated, even harassed by our corrupt Justice Department and our Gestapo FBI.
Well, one last word on inflation. Bank of America agrees with you and believes that America's going to be losing 175,000 jobs a month starting the beginning of the year. The head of the Bank of America says the premise for a hard landing is imminent rather than a softer one. And Mr. Powell, he said, after saying, look, our goal is a soft landing and pursuing inflation of 2%. But he said it is a very, very difficult, challenging task. And so Christians pray that God keeps her hands on you, that he blesses you despite what goes on there. And look, always remember, he knows our needs and he is the one that will see to it. So ask for that. But now, Jacob, let's move from Washington over to Iran. Okay, they have some very interesting work as they've had uprisings over the killing of a young lady because she wasn't wearing her Habib. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she was killed, taken, tortured, in prison, and then shortly after, 3 others, one being shot through the neck out in public, actually. And so now this has sparked up people, and now it's moved into a very interesting area there in Iran, something that could really take power from the mullahs. Can you expand on that?
The last time this happened was during the first 2 years of the Obama administration, where there was an uprising against the mullahs. Unfortunately, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton took the side of the radical fundamentalist terrorist sponsoring mullahs who were killing even American citizens, but Obama and Clinton were on their side. So there was a betrayal of certainly American interests, but a betrayal of the uprising in Iran. Obama did nothing. This time, it is likely to be pretty much the same. Don't expect Biden to do anything. These people, for all intent and purposes, may as well be on the side of the mullahs. The question is this: how far can this go? Well, the Obama administration bailed out the mullahs, unfreezing $150 billion of money to help pay for their terrorism and oppression. While Obama was yelling about women's rights and so-called gay rights, the mullahs were hanging homosexuals, homosexuals and lesbians, and they were oppressing women, as we see to this very day. It just shows what kind of a hypocrite and an unprincipled liar Barack Obama was and is. And that's perpetuated with Obama. He didn't care about homosexual rights or women rights or human rights. He gave them $150 billion. He didn't even care about the lives of Americans. They were funding terror. But before the Shah fell, before the fall of the Shah in the late 70s, during the Carter administration, and Carter bears a lot of responsibility for what happened. He was a weak, spineless president, a complete failure, both in economic policy and in foreign policy. Apart from Camp David, he was a complete failure, and he was seen as a spineless man internationally, which he was. He was a spineless man. He was just the coward in the Oval Office. That's how our enemies saw him, and rightly so. When the Shah fell, one of the things that spurned the downfall of the Shah were strikes in the Iranian oil and petrochemical industries. And those strikes are happening again. How far it will go without international support, I don't know. But those kind of strikes in the vital sector of petroleum production and petrochemicals was instrumental in creating the financial and economic tumult that shattered the financial base of the Shah's regime that led to his political collapse. And it's happening again in Iran as we speak. This particular time, of course, the Israelis and the Saudi Arabians know they cannot trust the United States anymore. Since Barack Obama, in effect, they know they cannot trust the United States anymore. The United States leans towards Iran in all but deed, or in fact, indeed, in all but word. The exception, of course, was Donald Trump. Donald Trump did stand up to the Iranians, and he rightly removed the terrorist Soleimani. But now we're back to business as usual. What Carter did, and what worse, what Obama did, and Hillary Clinton did, and Dean did, John Dean did, and continuing on now to the Biden administration, what they did, and certainly what Susan Rice did, and Valerie, what was her name?
Jarrett.
Yeah, Valerie Jarrett did. We're back to that kind of policy again. We're back to that kind of policy again. And the Iranians know it. So they're not as nervous as they otherwise would be from external support for an uprising. But internally, these oil strikes are very serious for the mullahs.
Right. Okay. Jacob, I want to stick on oil for just a couple more minutes. The Biden administration this past week has put pressure on Saudi Arabia they put them on before to allow them to please don't cut oil production. You know, I got an election coming up. And so they said they were going to do it anyway, but later they backed down. And so they're just going to postpone it for a month. So that means that we're going to be getting higher oil prices and everything as we continue, America continues its flawed energy policy. So how is this relationship with Saudi? How are they playing this relationship with Biden in the U.S., who they bought tons of missiles for, supporting our defense industrial complex? But is it pushing them to other allies?
They're definitely getting closer to Russia. The only thing is, the Ukraine has demonstrated the inferiority of Russian military hardware, particularly the S-300s and S-400s, which were purchased in massive quantities by both India and Iran. And the Saudis know that that junk doesn't work. It's not as good as the American HIMARS and other American weapon systems. So the Saudis are definitely being pushed towards Russia, but Russia is not a source of all of what they need, and they know it. Their main concern right now is Iran. So far, so much in fear of Iran and what that could mean that they've had a rapprochement with the Israelis, even though it is being downplayed diplomatically and in the media. Now, let's go back to Biden going with his hat in hand and licking boots. Boot licking Joe. Why is he doing that? Well, I guess he likes to lick boots. I get, he seems to be, some people play golf, some people lick boots. He likes to lick boots. I'm not just trying to offend him, but that's what he does. The man licks boots, particularly of people who don't like you. Well, what's on back of his boot licking? Please don't cut oil supplies. Please don't cut oil supplies. Here's what he really means. Because of the squad and because of Bernie Sanders and because of the left-wing socialists within the Democratic Party, I cannot allow open drilling. I cannot allow open fracking. I cannot remove the restrictions of oil exploration on federal land. I cannot remove the prohibition on resumption of the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. I cannot make America independent again. The first thing I did as president was I took America from being energy independent to make it energy dependent on Venezuela, on Iran, on Russia, and on Saudi Arabia. But I can't make America independent again. If America becomes energy independent, the Democratic Party will fragment and we won't win the election. So therefore, I'm going to lick your boots. How's that, sir? Well, you better lick them a little more. Nah, that's not too good of a job, Joe. We're still going to cut production, but thanks for licking my boots. That's what it comes to. That's exactly what it comes to. That is how pathetic and disgusting an individual we have in the White House and his whole administrations like that. Klain, Sullivan, all of them.
Yep. Jacob, it's the same thing. Biden and the EU have boycotted Russian products and trying to hurt them this way. And now the Democrats are saying, oh, let's boycott arms sales to Saudi Arabia. They're the number one importer of our arms and things. So they keep a lot of our top places like Riots in business. And so the Saudis don't want to do that, but they can play over here. It's like we want to cut off our nose to spite our face on arms sales, but also hurting ourselves with Russian oil and cutting all this and cutting our own thing. So this seems to be a common theme. Let's cut our own nose off to spite our face. And that'll be our foreign policy.
Well, don't forget the Saudi Arabians have upwards of $1 trillion invested in the American Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Sovereign wealth funds of the Gulf states similarly have large American holdings. It is not in their interest to hurt the American economy because they would be hurting their own portfolios. But there is definitely a political game and a high stakes political game going on. You see, people don't seem to understand this. Even with the recession, the Fed has no choice but to raise interest rates, not just because of inflation, but look at the map. China and Russia are fortunately both in economic trouble, but you have Brazil, you have India, you have China, you have Russia trying to form a BRIC, an alternative currency that would to some degree be gold-backed. That would be a reserve currency in lieu of the dollar. Now, the United States needs to have Russia and China in trouble economically, but also it needs a very strong dollar to prevent the emergence of the BRIC. And it also needs a weakening in gold prices. So even if there was not the inflation rate we have, the Fed would still have to keep the interest rates high in order to maintain the dollar as a reserve currency. You can't just look at the expansion of the money supply itself. There's this whole other geopolitical scenario that is part and parcel of the same of the same effect. And most people don't understand that because that's you're now playing chess, not checkers. Some people understand it, but most don't.
Yeah. So basically, we're raising our interest rates. Foreign countries are buying our bonds, and we're going to have to pay them higher interest back when we're already $31 trillion in debt. Well, how do we come out good on this?
It is a situation where it's lose-lose. It's either lose big or lose bigger. That is the situation the Biden administration has gotten us into. It is either lose big or lose bigger. The only things that are to America's advantage is that the euro and the British pound and the yuan and the ruble are in worse trouble. In fact, the ruble is not in worse trouble because of Biden's energy policies. The ruble is not in worse trouble. He's damaged the Russian economy with sanctions in certain areas, but not in terms of the value of its currency. Yeah. The ruble and the dollar are the two currencies who are doing the best. And again, we can thank Biden for that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, one thing the one good thing I can say, Jacob, about the strong dollar right now is that our missions programs that we have, like in Thailand and Philippines and all these other places, because we pay them in dollars, they're seeing actually more pesos, more bots, more of this getting put into their account. But those are inflated, so they're better off. But unlike the people of the Philippines, unlike the Thailand people who are suffering under some pretty good inflation in their own countries. So we're thankful for our many supporters who help us, and so we ask them, but there is that inflation over there. And again, it's minority as people that are poor are being hurt the worst. They're talking about, we used to get like 40 pesos per dollar. Now it's up to 50 something. It's probably going to go up to 73 within the next 2 years. So they're really going to be getting hurt in Philippines and other places. So please pray for our missions people, and because this just doesn't affect America. This is affecting the whole world and everything. So, hey,
but it does give a short-term boost.
Right.
Short-term boost to emissions programs. Yes. Things are going very well in India. We need to get that posted, of course, on the Moriel missions page. Yes. But we're now fully operational in India. The school, the whole bit. The children are being fed and educated, praise God, and we're getting a good exchange rate on the rupee, on the Indian rupee.
Yep. We had some sick kids, Jacob, so we need prayers for them. We had, they have that rain. They've had a lot of rain. And so it makes it hard on the kids and things like that, who sometimes their immunes are already suppressed. So we can always use prayer. But I want to ask you something a little bit about the EU, Jacob, oil policies. I hear my friends in England, the UK, they're buying electric blankets and personal heaters, electric heaters. Well, what's this going to look like this winter over there? And we see France is having, the workers are having an oil strike. And how is all these oil strikes and all this going to affect you guys there?
No matter what happens, and despite Nord Stream, Russia is still selling oil to Europe because there's nowhere else to get it in sufficient enough quantities. Norway is benefiting. Spain may eventually benefit if it can reach a solution with Morocco's objections to it getting oil and natural gas from Algeria, but also the main regasification of liquid gas regasification. Those ports and those plants are in Spain. So if the United States were to export more liquid gas to Europe, most of it comes into Spain. Germany, among its other failed energy policies, and Germany made one failed energy policy after another. It did not build gasification plants and ports along the Baltic Sea, which it should have. Poland began to, Germany did not. Germany in the EU is very much a victim of its own wrong decisions and its own bad policies under Angela Merkel, particularly. Specifically three. The first I already mentioned. They failed to build liquid gas gasification plants and port facilities to handle liquid gas transport ships along the Baltic and the North Sea. That they should have built those in Bremerhaven and Hamburg. They failed to do that. That's the first. The second is they stupidly listened to the Green Party because they have a unworkable electoral system of proportional representation, similar to Israel, where the Green parties have more muscle than they do numbers. And they forced Germany to go to a unworkable energy plan of 100% renewables, forgetting that the sun does not always shine or the breeze always blow. And it just forced them to maintain the old fossil fuel energy system and the new renewable one. So the cost already, even before the invasion of the Ukraine, the energy costs in Germany went through the ceiling. The third act of bad policy of Germany, under Merkel particularly, was what Donald Trump warned Germany of, and what he warned Europe of: reliance upon Putin, reliance upon Russia for a cheap source of oil and natural gas. So Germany has made three colossal mistakes, and it has no easy way out of it. No easy way out of it. And this is the industrial dynamo of continental Europe and of the EU. Germany is the paymaster of Europe. If Germany gets hit, it affects all of the other economies in continental Europe. Britain is not in a good way, but it will not be the worst off. I'd rather be in Britain than in continental Europe. And I'm glad Britain got out of the EU. At least it can pursue an independent policy. The countries in the EU cannot even pursue an independent energy policy. So what you're seeing in Europe is an increase in protest demonstrations of people wanting to follow Brexit. More and more people in Europe are beginning to say Brussels is a ball and chain. We don't want it. We can't act unilaterally anymore. We can't control our own currency anymore. And elements of the European right are becoming anti-NATO, saying, why should we fight for the Ukraine, or why should NATO be involved in taking the side of the Ukrainians against Putin when Putin can turn off the oil and natural gas and we suffer the consequence? We don't need them. Well, they are partly right in that the Ukraine was never a NATO country. But if they think that Putin is not a threat to them, they're out of their mind. Putin is a threat to everybody in Europe. He should have been stopped a long time ago. Had they had the sense to listen to Trump and others, they wouldn't be in quite this deep, but they are.
Well, Jacob, I remember watching Mr. Trump at the United Nothing, and he warned Germany directly, and the camera happened to hook on to the representatives of Germany. There was 4 of them there, and they were laughing at what he was saying. And all I can ask is, who's laughing now?
Correct. Who is laughing now?
Yep. And so they have a big problem. And we hear that the EU is going to pay $1 trillion more this year for this winter for fuel, which should really put a bigger hurt in everyone's pocketbook in the EU. I'm glad to hear that that the UK is better off, and that so
But there may be blackouts. There may be blackouts in the
maybe
UK.
blackout. So, well, may God help the UK. We're glad they're out of that. Speaking of the United Nothings, they voted overwhelmingly to condemn Russia's annexation of the four things. So how powerful is that a message to Russia?
The General Assembly is all bark, no bite.
Yeah.
To the degree the UN has power, it's the Security Council where Russia has a veto. This dates back, of course, to the lack of foresight and the lack of competence of Harry Truman and the Truman administration when the UN was founded. But Russia has a veto in the Security Council. If the Security Council does not pass a resolution, the resolution really doesn't matter. The rest is just fanfare and political theater.
Okay. Well, Jacob, I think we've got an hour in already. James, is that about right? And maybe we can start putting Jacob onto the hot seat. Jacob, we see that federal midterm elections, most people don't know this, since I get calls from the Republicans, I get emails begging me how they're broke. But these midterms, that they're spending, both parties, $9.3 billion. 9.3 billion.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Why are they calling me? It's crazy. Where all these companies are paying for them, all these PACs and everybody. But God willing, we'll.
Not only that, but what you're not told, or what people are not told, is a lot of those calls and a lot of those massive circulars and massive emailings are coming from professional companies that are fundraising companies. They outsource their political contributions to these professional fundraising companies who take a percentage of it.
Yes.
They take a percentage of the political contribution. It is, look, there was a reason the founding fathers of the United States did not envision political parties in the sense that they've come to exist.
Yeah.
It was never in the thinking of the framers of the Constitution that we should have political parties in the sense we have them now.
Yep, and it's kind of, it's one thing when you see like an Israel. Oh, I want to put you on the hot spot before we get our first question, Jacob. I'm wondering about this Lebanon-Israel control for an agreement for the gas over there. Is that a go, a no-go, or is it just more too much infighting? Because that could be good for both, but maybe more so for terrorists and their pocketbooks.
The Biden administration pressured the Israelis. There are elements of it that would seem to be good if they were enforceable. However, Iran controls Hezbollah, and the idea that any Lebanese profits from oil will not go to Hezbollah is ridiculous. It's just naive. Nobody can believe it. Now, it would seem like a fair agreement if it were enforceable, but it's not enforceable. Iran already told Nasrallah to be ready to fight for that oil in August. Who is going to control Hezbollah inside of Lebanon? There is no standing military force capable of doing it. The Assad regime is aligned with Iran. They're Syrians. Who else is going to do it? There is no military force in Lebanon capable of controlling Hezbollah. It's just not enforceable.
Not a good thing then. Okay, I have my first question, Jacob. Will the UK have to join Macron's EU club? Will Northern Ireland Protocol lead to a united Ireland?
The issue of Northern Ireland is a sore thumb for both Britain and for Europe. Here is the problem. Northern Ireland is not part of the EU. The Republic of Ireland is. Because of the economic ties of Ireland to Great Britain, the Republic of Ireland is also in a difficult situation because its main trading partner is no single country in continental Europe, but it's Great Britain. Additionally, as part of the Good Friday Agreement ending the so-called Troubles in Northern Ireland, there was a very relaxed open border policy between Northern Ireland, the 6 counties of Ulster, and the Republic of Ireland. But you would have to put back custom controls. There is a fear that if you put a border back with custom controls, it will reignite sectarian violence in Northern Ireland. There would have to be a separate, there's only 2 solutions, a separate negotiated special settlement between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland that the EU would approve of, Brussels would approve of, because the Irish can no longer control their own destiny. They sold themselves down the river to Europe, or Ireland leave the EU. Those are the only 2, and Ireland is not likely in the short term to leave the EU, not likely. The only party that was against the EU was Sinn Féin, and they are no longer opposed to Ireland being in the EU. They may not like it, but they're no longer opposed to it. So what's the solution? There absolutely must be a negotiated local agreement between Britain, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the EU that would keep the border open without customs control. The problem there is, well, what about things that come into Northern Ireland that are manufactured in England, Scotland, and Wales? Now it's not just produce or products from Northern Ireland coming south, or it's not just things from the Republic of Ireland moving to the north of Ireland. What's going to stop anyone from driving one of those lorries, those tractor trailers, on a ferry and bringing it across from Scotland to Scotland or to England from Ireland? Nothing. It is a very complicated situation. I do believe it can be negotiated, but I don't believe it's going to be easy.
Well, Jacob, before I get to this next question, which you and I have both answered dozens of times in our life, but it is an important question nonetheless. That's why it gets asked a lot. But I remember when I was much, much younger that Mr. Biden used to hang out with guys in the IRA, Sinn Féin, and he's hung out with a lot of terrorists along his lifespan. You know, you want to talk to anything about that?
It is a difficult situation. Irish Americans tend to relate to the Ireland they heard about from their grandparents and great-grandparents. They relate the troubles that have taken place from the 1960s until Good Friday. They tend to relate to that in terms of it being a continuity of the Easter Uprising and of the Black and Tan and all these kind of things when the Irish struggled against the British for their independence. That is a half-truth. The provisional IRA are not the IRA of Michael Collins. Additionally, what Irish Americans are oblivious to is the real killing and bloodshed in Ireland, or I should say, the worst killing and bloodshed in Ireland, was not the killing and bloodshed between Britain and Ireland with the Black and Tans and so forth in the Easter Uprising. The far bloodier and far crueler was the civil war in Ireland between the IRA and the Irish government. It was far worse, Irish killing Irish, and the hatred between De Valera, Eamon De Valera, who was from New York, and those who followed Michael Collins. What the Irish did to each other was worse than anything that happened in the Easter Uprising. It was a very cruel war. To this day, the main political parties in Ireland, Fine Gael and Fine Gael, they're not about being liberal or conservative. They're about which faction did you support in the Irish Civil War? The pro-treaty, who wanted the peace treaty with England, or the ones who were against it? They're prisoners of history. Now, Irish Americans generally don't know most of these facts. Neither do they understand that it was not just the provisional IRA, but you had the Irish Liberation Army and other radical socialist and communist elements of Irish terrorists who were integrated with Gaddafi, who were obtaining arms from radical Islamic sources, who were involved in all kinds of things. Additionally, the provisional IRA earned income from organized crime. Much of what went on in Northern Ireland among both the Irish Republican Army, the provisional IRA, and the UVF and the Protestant and the Ulster Volunteer Force and so forth, most of it, probably most of it, to some degree, was involved in organized crime, and much of it was just organized crime being carried out under the banner of politics and religion. But it wasn't about politics and religion. It was about money and crime. And Irish Americans are naive. They're oblivious to this. They really don't understand the situation. There is no doubt that there was a history of injustice perpetrated against Catholic Irish by the Stormont governments of Northern Ireland. That is very, very true. Irish Americans are aware of that. But what they don't know is that there's a neighborhood in London called Kilburn, where you have 500,000 people who left the Republic of Ireland, who left Dublin and Cork to live under the British Crown, to live under the Union Jack, to have a better life and a better future for their families economically than they could get in Holy Catholic Ireland. They don't tell you about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Irish that came to England and that continued to come to the United States and to Australia. Because the economy of the Republic of Ireland was so weak and unemployment was so high. They came to England to live under the Queen for a better life. They don't tell you that. Irish Americans are just oblivious. Now, a guy like Biden, who comes from Pennsylvania, you've got these cities like Philadelphia and Boston and Chicago and New York with huge Irish American populations. And he's just playing a political card to try to get the Irish vote. That's all. There's people who try to get the Jewish vote. There's people who try to get the black vote. There's people who try to get the Italian vote. Well, he just tries to get the Jewish vote. It's just like any other politician.
Okay. Jacob, we forgot this one. And this is my fault. We watched a video this week of some doctors who are finished their education. They're getting ready to go out into the marketplace and make their living. And they took an oath. They took a very strange oath, not the Hippocratic oath, but an oath to give preference to minorities, and such as Indians and etc. And can you talk about that for a minute or two? And we will get to this person's question, two-part question. It's important. And then and if anybody out there is listening, they want to send me a direct question, it's morieldavid@yahoo.com, morieldavid@yahoo.com. You want to comment on that, those doctors?
Concerning the oath, it was medical students who were to become physicians.
Yeah.
Concerning
Sorry.
the oath, it exemplified, it illustrated the dishonesty and absurdity of the woke ethos. It opens by saying, in our oath, we affirm that this university, this hospital is built on what was Lakota land, referring to the Lakota Indian tribe. Okay. And the white people took it. That's what they basically were saying. Okay. This was Lakota land. Well, according to the Sioux, Chippewa, Blackfoot, Crow, and other Indian tribes of the Northern Plains, it was their land. The Lakota, they called the Sioux. They called them Sioux, which meant invader. The Lakota, it was not their land. The Lakota came from Minnesota. They went west in military or invading hordes and took the land of other tribes. This is Lakota land, not according to the other tribes. The whole thing is a revisionist lie. The whole woke culture is based on revisionism. Half truth. They tell half truths about slavery. They tell half truths about what happened to Native Americans. They tell half truths about almost everything. But now let's just put this in the context of medical education. Those students in neonatology are learning how neonatology goes about saving the life of a premature baby. The later the baby is born in gestation, the higher its survivability rate. They teach them that. They teach them about incubator technology. They teach them about all kinds of things. Amniocentetic diagnosis antenatally. They teach them all kinds of things. They have to pass exams. And then after teaching them, this is a human life that we can save, even though it's born prematurely, even though it has an underdeveloped pulmonary system, we can do this, this, and this. Despite its weak immune system, we can do this, this by keeping it in an incubator and so forth. You have to be willing to abort it and say that it's not a life. There is a moral contradiction and a logical contradiction in modern medical education. And that's just one example. It is the same thing with gender identity, X and Y chromosomes. They teach them genetics and medical genetics, and then they tell them to ignore it. That's what it comes to. The whole thing is politicized. It is a politically manipulated lie. And that's medical science. These are people who are supposed to be objective, scientific. This is what's happened to medical education in America, but it's what's happened to education in America. You have institutions that are academic whorehouses. Georgetown is an academic whorehouse in Washington. It has a School of International Studies that trains diplomats, supposedly. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the worst human rights abuses in the world, worst women's rights abuses in the world, fund it, influence the curriculum. China, worst human rights abuses you can imagine, funding the curriculum in these left-wing American institutions. But these same left-wing liars who are the trustees of these universities, who discriminate against Asian and Caucasian Americans on admissions policies, and who talk about being woke and talk about women's rights and homosexual rights. They talk about these things, but they're funded by foreign regimes who are the antithesis of what they claim to believe in. These people are academic whores. That's what they are. That is what the mainstream university system has become. On top of that, it's a racket. You're paying for administration. You're paying exorbitant increases in tuition and fees every year beyond inflation. Beyond inflation. And it gets worse and worse.
On and on and on. And by way of note, Saudi Arabia and China have both increased their funding in our schools to buy influence, not only of this generation, but they believe these generation will be future leaders. And they're also, Jacob, they're also doing it in the sports field. They're buying players and things, and like in the live golf, they're getting people to be sympathetic to them. So they're not, it's not just education, it's sports. They're trying to come into our country and buy influences in very different ways. So now we had a Christian ask this question. It's a two-part question. Can a professed Christian be saved without being baptized in water? And the second part is, why did Jesus get baptized?
Okay. First of all, I'll take the first half first, and then the second half about Jesus. The good thief was not baptized, but he was saved. Yet Jesus said, "He who believes and is baptized shall be saved." As we've explained before, an unbaptized Christian by immersion is like an unburied corpse. Don't bury me, don't bury me. Well, then you must not be dead. You must not be a new creation. Or it is like an unconsummated marriage. I don't want to sleep with you. Well, then what did we get married for? It is incomplete process. It is an incomplete process. Burial is part of a process. So baptism is burial, coming out is resurrection. You didn't finish the process. Consummation means completion in Greek. The Greek word for to consummate a marriage means to finish. Finish what you began. You didn't finish it. Now, if somebody was pronounced man and wife in a church, and God forbid they walked out of the church and one of them dropped dead, they would have died as a married couple. For all legal purposes, the husband or the wife who survived would be the next of kin. Okay, nobody can say that because they didn't consummate the marriage, that the marriage was invalid. But non-consummation is legally at least grounds for annulment. Now, I don't say it's grounds for divorce, but it's certainly grounds for annulment. It is not normal. If somebody will not get baptized, you have to question, are they really saved? But if somebody does get saved and dies before they have the opportunity to be baptized, the good thief shows us that they still have salvation. Concerning why did Jesus get baptized? Well, obviously, as an example to us. If he did it, we should. But there was something else. Jesus represented the new covenant. John the Baptist represented the old covenant. Okay. When Jesus died, the law was fulfilled. Okay. The law was not abolished, but it was fulfilled. The law of sin and death. When he comes out, it's a new covenant. The baptism of Jesus represents the difference between the old covenant and the new. The Messiah would be the new. The old had to go under the water. The new had to come out. John represented the law. None born among women is greater than John. The law and prophets are preached until John, then grace and truth from the time of Jesus. Jesus would fulfill the law, okay, and atone for the fact that we broke it, but then he would be a new covenant. So his baptism illustrates the transition in covenant. That is very similar to changing the water to wine in Cana. The changing of the water to wine in Cana demonstrates a transition in covenant. The baptism of Jesus demonstrates a transition in covenant. I hope that explains it.
Okay. Jacob, question. Do you have any comments on the current thing in Israel with the red heifers?
There have been many red heifers. Red heifers, to be accepted by rabbinic law now, have to be of a certain age and cannot have any more than 3 white hairs. And some rabbis would say even 1 would disqualify it, possibly. The Levitical priesthood would have to be reinstituted, and the temple would have to be rebuilt. I'm not saying that there is not some prophetic significance to the interest in red heifers and the interest in the Temple Institute and others in having red heifers that might prove suitable to consecrate the instrumentation necessary to restore Levitical worship and sacrifice. But we're not there yet. Remember, the temple that's going to be rebuilt is the tribulational temple. It is not the millennial temple. It is not the temple where Jesus will reign from in the millennial reign. It is the tribulational temple. It is being built for Antichrist to set up the Shikutza Meshomem, the abomination of desolation. It is not a good thing. When you see people getting excited and thinking it's wonderful, and even people, Christians, donating money to this stuff, this is absurd. God will allow those prophecies to be fulfilled in his time and in his way. It's not what we are called to do. Now, should we recognize that there is some prophetic significance to the interest in red heifers? Well, yes, we should, certainly. But remember, the rebuilding of the temple is not good. It's going to be rebuilt for the Antichrist to deceive the Jews who will make a covenant with death. They've rejected, most of them have rejected the true Messiah, and they will accept the false one. Something terrible is going to happen. It is not a positive sign.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Here, although he is not on the same wavelength as me in terms of the timing of the rapture, I would agree, among others, with Jack Hibbs. Jack Hibbs has a view very similar to my own in this respect. I think Jack Hibbs, what he said is correct. But his view just echoes my own, more or less.
Okay. Well, all right, Jacob, we got another question that kind of follows on the same hills. We have the Abrahamic Accords going on, and there's a house of prayer that is nearly completed now, and the caller wants to, the writer needs, somehow will this play a part in Daniel 9:27?
Look, all of these things, the Abrahamic Accords and the so-called House of Prayer in Abu Dhabi and things of this nature, all of these things are setting the stage for the false peace in the Middle East the Antichrist will bring. But we should not see these things as positive. We should see them as prophetic in their significance, but not in any positive sense. Remember, as the Holy Spirit is preparing the faithful church for the coming of Christ, the spirit of Antichrist is preparing the harlot church and the world's false religious system and backslidden Judaism, rabbinic Judaism. He's preparing them for the coming of Antichrist. A false peace in the Middle East will be very much part of the Antichrist agenda. I am not enthusiastic about the Abrahamic Accords. I recognize it has a prophetic aspect to it, certainly, but I do not see it as something positive.
All right. Well, that seems to be the last of our questions, Jacob. So I have to tell you, I've enjoyed spending time with you. Marco will be back next week, God willing, from Arizona, and a week off, a well-deserved week off. And I guess we would ask prayers, Jacob, as you and Marco head to Israel, and please pray that they find the right places to scout out and to start production on the new upcoming Daniel film. If you would like to comment on that, that would be good. And then hopefully pray for that we can get this project off the ground and started filming next year.
Yes. I'd also like to ask prayer for a couple of very important Moriel team members. The founder of Moriel Missions, or the co-founder with myself, Dave Royal, who founded Ebion in Africa and who's a trustee of Moriel in the UK, is quite ill. Like myself, he suffers with lymphatic edema, and like myself, he has developed cellulitis, as I did in 2015. But his case is compounded by the fact that he's also a serious diabetic. Please keep Dave Royal in prayer. Also, please pray for Beryl Hunter. Beryl Hunter does a lot of things in Moriel. She's our event organizer. She manages my itinerary in the UK, but she's our conference organizer. And she also coordinates our activities in the Ukraine, our work with the Ukrainian refugees in Poland, war refugees, and our work with the church that we're connected with in the Ukraine. So our work in the Ukraine and our work among Ukrainian refugees is coordinated by Beryl, and Beryl is having major heart problems. She's probably going to have heart surgery. So please pray for Beryl Hunter. Both of these people are very important to our work in ministry, but more importantly, we love them very dearly, and we need them. So please pray for both of them. Finally, I would ask prayer that the Lord's consolation would be with Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum. Arnold Fruchtenbaum's wife, Marianne, who I knew, but not all well. I knew her from Camp Shoshana in upstate New York, near Montreal, but I haven't seen her in a very long time. She's had a lifelong battle with a debilitating medical condition, and she finally went to be with the Lord this week. But Arnold loved her very much, and they were married a very long time. Please pray for Arnold Fruchtenbaum during this particular time. I'm sure his wife, Miriam, she's quite happy to get out of this place, given her condition. It was far better to go to be with the Lord for all of us, but especially for someone who suffered physically and medically as much as she did. But Arnold remains. So please keep Arnold Fruchtenbaum in your prayers. Thank you so very much.
All right. Until we see everybody again, we thank you all for joining in. And again, we ask prayers for Moriel around the world, and all of our missionaries, for our children that we help. I mean, like, I've seen poor around the world, and people don't, until you personally experience, you don't know how bad it is. And we're so thankful we have men like Pastor Paul, who shepherds over these children, and who his poor wife, who used to cook for 100 kids in her little single kitchen that you and I couldn't get through the gap between the stove and the other side of the kitchen. Just what a woman. So anyway, pray for these people, our work in India. The prayers of the saints help so much. And so we thank you, and shalom, shalom.
Shalom, God bless. I will see you when I get back from Holland and Germany. God bless.